You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. When you sit for the PMP exam, or when you manage projects in practice, you may notice that the core logic of PMI project management doesn't change from industry to industry. What changes are the artifacts, the jargon, and the compliance or safety expectations that frame decisions. This lab deliberately pulls you into three different industries, healthcare, finance, and construction, to show you that the patterns are universal. Whether you are handling an electronic health record rollout, a vendor data feed in banking, or a scaffold inspection in construction, you will see the same underlying rhythm: artifact first, impact before action, and policy over personality. By rehearsing these shifts across industries, you train yourself to focus on professional discipline instead of being distracted by surface-level details. Your task in this lab is not simply to pick the right answer, but to name the artifact you would check first and the owner you would brief immediately. This habit grounds you in evidence and ensures you bring the right stakeholders into the loop early. In healthcare, the owner might be the compliance officer or privacy officer. In finance, it might be the risk officer or internal controls manager. In construction, it could be the safety officer or permitting authority. PMI emphasizes that ownership of artifacts and accountability for outcomes must be visible. By practicing with these industry shifts, you'll get more comfortable carrying the PMI framework into contexts that may not be your home turf. Another theme across these industries is the need to keep compliance and safety visible at all times. In healthcare, compliance means adhering to HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which protects patient data and privacy. In finance, compliance often references the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which governs financial reporting and requires strict control frameworks. In construction, compliance is tied to safety codes, permits, and inspections that literally protect human lives. On the exam and in practice, compliance and safety are not optional extras. They are constraints that must be respected from the very first decision. Keeping them visible in your reasoning shows maturity and professional responsibility. Let's begin with the healthcare scenario. You are overseeing the rollout of a new electronic health record, EHR module. This module touches patient data, which is classified as protected health information, PHI. HIPAA requires that any system handling PHI meet strict privacy standards. As you prepare for deployment, the compliance officer raises a concern. Staff training is incomplete, and not everyone understands how the new module processes privacy. The sponsor, eager to show progress, suggests launching anyway and addressing training later. You face a familiar tension: pressure to deliver value quickly versus the obligation to protect compliance and patient safety. The artifacts to consult are the compliance register, the training plan with its completion records, the change log, and the acceptance criteria for the module. The options in this scenario mirror common real-world pressures. One choice is to deploy immediately, hoping to clean up training afterward. Another is to cancel the release, delaying delivery until all risks are resolved. A third proposes a minimal compliance slice paired with targeted training, supported by evidence and updated change and benefits logs. A fourth suggests moving PHI off the platform temporarily without approvals, hoping to skirt compliance rules. Each distractor plays to a tempting value speed, caution, or pragmatism, but each sacrifices something PMI considers critical. The only disciplined path is the one that balances cadence with compliance and leaves behind evidence. The correct first action is to release only a minimal compliance slice, ensure that targeted training for staff is delivered in advance of that slice, capture compliance evidence, and update the change log and benefits plan to reflect the adjustment. This approach allows you to move forward but without violating HIPAA requirements. Deploying without training is reckless. Canceling outright wastes momentum and undermines stakeholder confidence. Moving PHI without approval is both non-compliant and unethical. By contrast, the compliance slice paired with training demonstrates that cadence and compliance can coexist. The artifact you open first is the compliance register, and the owner you brief is the privacy officer, ensuring regulatory confidence is preserved. Now let's move into the finance industry. Here, the context is a payment interface. A vendor provides a data feed, and 2 weeks before launch, they announce a change to a key field specification. Such a change could break downstream systems and threaten regulatory compliance. The artifacts you must check first are the Statement of Work, which defines vendor obligations, the Contract Change Clause, which governs how modifications must be handled, the Risk Register, which ensures exposure is tracked, and the Controls Matrix, required under SOX, which ensures financial reporting remains reliable. Without these artifacts, you are left with vendor assurances instead of documented protections. The options echo common reactions. Approving the change verbally feels cooperative but skips documentation. Ignoring the change until after go-live feels expedient but risks failure in production. Switching vendors immediately looks decisive but ignores analysis and creates disruption. The professional path is to require a written impact analysis, process a contract amendment through the change clause, update the controls and testing plan, and re-forecast launch expectations. This disciplined response aligns with contract governance and regulatory frameworks, ensuring both compliance and delivery integrity. The correct answer is therefore to demand written impact evidence, amend the contract formally, adjust your control frameworks, and sync testing plans with the updated requirements. Approving verbally would leave no audit trail. Ignoring the change would invite downstream defects. Switching vendors is an overreaction that ignores feasibility. The artifact you open first is the contract and its change clause, and the owners you brief are the risk officer and the internal controls lead. This ensures that regulators and executives alike see governance being respected. PMI expects you to connect contractual discipline with compliance safeguards under pressure. Notice how both healthcare and finance scenarios follow the same rhythm, even though the details differ. In healthcare, the compliance register and training records defined the move. In finance, the contract and controls framework did. In both cases, the wrong answers appealed to speed, caution, or improvisation, while the right answer emphasized evidence and governance. PMI situational questions are designed to test whether you will protect integrity first and adapt within policy, regardless of the domain. That is the universal language of professional project management. These two examples also show how artifacts shift in prominence across industries. Healthcare emphasizes compliance registers and training plans. Finance emphasizes contracts and controls. But in both contexts, the rhythm remains artifact, right pointing arrow impact analysis, right pointing arrow decision via policy, right pointing arrow update records, right pointing arrow communicate. When you train yourself to see this pattern, you stop being distracted by jargon. HIPAA or SOX may not be familiar acronyms to you, but they still boil down to compliance registers and control frameworks artifacts PM I want you to respect before acting. The key lesson from this first half is that industry doesn't change PMI logic. It just changes which artifacts are in the spotlight. In healthcare, safety and privacy dominate. In finance, contracts and control frameworks anchor decisions. The wrong answers will always tempt you toward shortcuts, appeasement, or overreaction. The right answers will always involve artifacts, evidence, and policy. If you can hold on to that, you will stay objective even in contexts outside your personal experience. That is exactly what PMI wants to see. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. When we shift into the construction domain, the pressures feel very different from healthcare or finance, yet the logic of PMI project management remains the same. Imagine you are managing a project where an inspector flags a safety issue with scaffolding. At the same time, a critical task on the schedule depends on that scaffold. and the task sits directly on the critical path. Pressure builds immediately because if the task slips, the downstream milestones may slip as well. But the PMI mindset is clear. Safety and compliance are not negotiable. You must always stop unsafe work first, even if it means delaying critical path tasks. The artifacts you would consult at this moment include the Safety Management Plan, the Permits and Inspections Log, the Project Schedule Model, and the Issue Log. The Safety Management Plan spells out what actions are required when safety concerns are identified. The Permits and Inspection Log provide the formal authority that backs the inspector's findings. The Schedule Model helps you see which tasks can be resequenced or adjusted to limit delay. The Issue Log ensures the problem is captured, given an owner, and tracked transparently. These artifacts keep you disciplined, ensuring that your response is structured rather than improvised. You will often see tempting but dangerous options in scenarios like this. One might suggest that you simply proceed with the task and fix the scaffold after hours, prioritizing schedule over safety. Another might propose escalating to the owner and asking for a waiver. Yet another might imply that you could hide the inspector's finding to avoid a delay. Each of these paths undermines either compliance, safety, or ethics. They might look like they protect the schedule, but in truth, they expose the project, the organization, and even lives to severe risk. The disciplined first action is to stop the affected work, remediate the scaffold per the safety plan, and resequence other tasks in the schedule model where possible to keep progress moving. At the same time, you record the finding in the issue log and communicate transparently to stakeholders. If baseline updates are required, you process them through change control, but only after safety is restored. By following this rhythm, you protect people, maintain compliance, and still show that you are looking for ways to protect value. It demonstrates stewardship, not panic. This decision underlines PMI's principle that certain constraints are absolute. In healthcare, patient privacy is absolute. In finance, regulatory controls are absolute. In construction, safety is absolute. Schedule, scope, and cost are important, but they must flex when safety or compliance is in question. A project manager who chooses to ignore the inspector or conceal the finding is showing a failure of leadership. PMI expects you to demonstrate the courage to protect people first, while still using artifacts to manage schedule and value where possible. That balance defines professionalism. Now that we have worked across healthcare, finance, and construction, let's pull out some cross-industry heuristics that tie these lessons together. In regulated industries like healthcare, the guiding principle is to follow the policy path and capture evidence. In financial services, the guiding principle is to apply contract mechanisms and update internal controls. In construction, the guiding principle is to stop unsafe work, follow safety plans and permits, and resequence tasks to protect value. Across all three, the universal rhythm is the same. Check the artifact first, analyze the impact, act through policy, update records, and communicate transparently. To practice this transfer, let's run a short lightning round. Here's a healthcare-style STEM. Before go live, an auditor asks for proof of privacy training, but records are incomplete. What do you do first? The disciplined response is, verify the training plan and completion records, and immediately brief the compliance officer to ensure regulators are satisfied. Now consider a finance-style STEM. A vendor makes a last-minute change to a data field in a payment system. The first move is, request a written impact analysis, check the contract change clause, and brief the risk officer and internal controls lead. In both cases, the answer starts with an artifact and an owner. Lightning drills like these are effective because they reinforce the reflex of pairing a verb with an artifact and a responsible owner. Saying it aloud helps. You might phrase it as, first I would verify and check the training plan, or first I would request a written impact analysis and check the contract. These verbal cues slow you down just enough to resist shortcuts, while still letting you answer quickly. They keep you rooted in PMI's artifact-first discipline, even when the industry context is unfamiliar or intimidating. As you practice, it helps to tag your own misses. If you fell for the healthcare trap of deploying without training, that is a process miss you skipped compliance. If you chose to approve a finance change verbally, that is a rush error. You let pressure override policy. If you ignored the construction safety flag, that is a misread. You underestimated the absolute weight of safety. By tagging mistakes this way, you make them visible. Once visible, you can pair each tag with a short corrective script and rehearse it. That's how errors turn into durable points. To lock in these lessons, it helps to build a personal list of spoken reminders. Instead of symbols or shorthand, use short sentences you can recall under pressure. For example, when the impact is unclear, analyze before you act. When compliance is touched, follow the policy path and capture evidence. When a vendor requests change, require written impact analysis and use the contract mechanism. When flow problems appear, enforce work-in-progress limits and focus on the bottleneck first. When safety is flagged, stop the work and resequence through the safety plan. These are simple enough to repeat under stress, but precise enough to keep you aligned with PMI expectations. Another practical step is to expand your study notes with industry-specific artifact lists. For healthcare, write down compliance registers, HIPAA evidence packs, training records, and acceptance criteria. For finance, note contracts, change clauses, SOX control matrices, and test plans. For construction, add safety management plans, inspection logs, permits, and issue registers. These lists demystify the jargon. They help you see that every industry artifact maps back to familiar PMI categories, registers, baselines, contracts, and logs. The labels may change, but the logic is the same. To deepen your comfort, pick one industry that is less familiar to you and build a small drill set of questions in that domain. If you are less comfortable with healthcare, focus on compliance and privacy examples. If finance is foreign, work on procurement and control frameworks. If construction is outside your world, focus on safety and permits. As you answer, phrase your responses in the PMI rhythm: first action, correct artifact, and owner to brief. Speaking your answers aloud builds the reflex to respond with structure rather than instinct. Finally, use your review sessions to tie weak areas back to earlier labs in this series. If contracts tripped you up in finance, revisit predictive procurement scenarios from episode 82. If compliance confused you in healthcare, return to the compliance labs from episodes 74 and 86. If flow bottlenecks in construction made you hesitate, go back to the Kanban and flow metrics in episode 61. The PMP exam is designed to mix domains, so strengthening links across them ensures you can carry PMI principles anywhere. The closing reflection here is straightforward. Professionalism is portable. PMI does not expect you to know every healthcare statute, every finance regulation, or every construction code in detail. What it expects is that you respect compliance and safety, check the correct artifact, analyze before acting, and make decisions through policy rather than instinct. Those habits carry across industries. By practicing with this sampler, you prepare not only for variety on the exam, but also for the reality that most projects operate in cross-functional, regulated environments. Your calm, artifact-driven reflex is what earns trust in all of them. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.